And just a note for everyone, we will be recording this session and we are live on Facebook right now. So if you do not want to be featured on either of those platforms in the recording or on the Facebook Live, if you could just turn your camera off, then we won't be able to see you. And if you can just hold your questions or maybe put them in the chat box, then we'll be able to answer you that way.
Hey everyone, we'll go ahead and get started in just a little bit. If you haven't already, please feel free to type in your name, your graduation year, and high school if you're a student. And if you could also add how you heard about this meeting. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I am the Education and Collaborative Action Project Manager at Impact Tulsa. I will be leading the next couple of FAFSA events, but welcome. We are joined by folks on Zoom and people on Facebook Live as well, and we're so excited to see each and every one of you. And so that we know who is joining us today, go ahead and type in your name, your graduation year, and your high school in the chat box when you arrive, and let us know how you heard about this meeting. I am so thrilled to be joined by friends from the Tulsa area school districts and higher education institutions from across the state, including Tulsa Community Foundation, the University of Oklahoma, Langston University, Northeastern State University, Oklahoma State University, the University of Tulsa, and Rogers State University. Impact Tulsa is a Tulsa-based collaborative action group that is part of National Strive Together Network. We support 21 school districts and a host of post-secondary partners like colleges, universities, and technology centers in the Tulsa area. Impact Tulsa's focus is on helping every child from cradle to career succeed in school and in life. From kindergarten readiness to high school graduation to post-secondary completion and employment, Impact Tulsa uses Strive Together's principles of engaging the community, advancing equity, developing a culture of continuous learning and improvement, and leveraging existing resources within the community to promote the high quality education of every student. So before we get started, I want to go over a few logistical details. The meeting sessions, if you haven't heard, will be recorded so that you can watch them later. We will post them on Facebook Live, and the Q&A session will not necessarily be recorded, but it will be Facebook Live. So if you do have other questions that have a little bit more private information, feel free to sign up for a session with financial aid officers. We'll get you more contact information on that later. And we will share some of the resources through chat boxes on the Zoom and the comment box on Facebook. So feel free to communicate by typing into those. And remember to mute yourself during the presentation and unmute yourself if you want to share anything. And to mute and unmute yourself, you'll just click on the microphone icon on the bottom left part of your screen right there. And if you have any questions you would like to ask out loud, you can go ahead and raise your hand by clicking on the participation tab right here and selecting the raise hand option. And finally, to access the chat feature, as I mentioned before, you can go ahead and click the chat bubble icon on the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. So the goal of our time together today is to give you senior level students and families as much information as you need to successfully complete your FAFSAs. We also want to create a space for you to connect with a financial aid officer who can help guide you through the process. And we know that completing your FAFSA can be a little overwhelming, and we're just here to help you. And please note that the current FAFSA application is for 2020 seniors right now, but in a couple of weeks, it'll open up for the seniors this year. So here is the breakdown of the meeting. So what will happen is everyone will get to hear about FAFSA from the incredible Ryan Nashe, the post-secondary director at Tulsa Public Schools. And after Ryan's presentation, Zoom participants will break out into smaller groups of their choice. So there are 4 options that you can choose. If you have questions that you need answered about FAFSA, you will want to go to Breakout 1, and I don't think that means you'll stay in the main session. That's all about FAFSA, led by John Tao and Emily Ashley at Union Public Schools. John Tao's from TCC. And to learn about independent or dependent status, who is considered a parent on the FAFSA, you'll go ahead and do Breakout Room 2. You'll choose number 2 with Gary Garofalo from the University of Tulsa. If you would like to learn about some common misconceptions and myths about FAFSA, you will go to room 3 with Ryan Nashe from TPS. And finally, if you're interested in learning about any additional documentation, FAFSA verifications, or tax information, you will go to room 4 with Doug. And then the Facebook Live participants will stay in the main room and go over the Q&A session. And again, I ask that if you have any private information, that you go ahead and schedule a time with a financial aid officer. So right now I do ask as a check-in that you type in a number 1 through 4 in the chat box so that we can start getting you guys into those breakout rooms once Brian is done with his main session. And if you are in a Zoom breakout session that ends early and you want to watch another session, all you'll have to do once we are done is come back to the main room and we'll go ahead and place you in another session if that's what you want. And if you also want that one-on-one support, we can also assist you in that way as well. And before I hand it off to Ryan, I just have one more thing to add. I'm putting a link into a Google folder with lots of FAFSA information from each of the institutions on this call in the chat box now. So you can follow the link after this meeting to access the resources, and we'll also include it in a follow-up email as well if you don't get a chance to look at it now. So with that, please go ahead if you haven't already, put your number in so we can get you into breakout rooms. And I think I'm going to hand it off to Ryan.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for introducing us. And just a big shout out again to Impact Tulsa and all the partners that are joining us, as well as any seniors, or if there's juniors or anybody else joining us for this actual FAFSA event. Thank you so much for thinking of yourself and trying to figure out the next steps of your collegiate career. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. It should be about a 10-minute little tutorial on just general terms and next steps, and just good things to know about FAFSA overall. And as Vanessa said, we're going to jump into breakout sessions based on the numbers you just said. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go from there. I do ask that you just kind of wait through it, and then when we're done, we can work through that on the breakout sessions. All right, if my computer works. Here we go. So as we're all here, as we all know, we're here for FAFSA. If you didn't know that, welcome to the FAFSA event. So moving forward, I'm just going to go through some general important dates and terms to start us off with. So for important dates, as Vanessa said, the actual application for the FAFSA actually does not open until October 1st. So you have a few more weeks until it actually opens. However, you're more than welcome to gather all the information we tell you to beforehand, so it's streamlined and ready to go when it actually opens for you. December 15th is another important one. It's a preferred FAFSA deadline. So it opens October 1st and then doesn't close, but preferred deadline is December 15th because money goes to those who actually sign up first and then kind of trickles down from there. May 1st is another one. It's a National College Decision Day. So if you apply to any colleges or whatnot, that is the day that they're going to get back to you first and kind of work from there. And then finally, June 30th is your final deadline to submit. However, if you were you a senior last year and you're still going to school this year, we still please encourage you to fill out the FAFSA no matter what, especially on this day and time, and we don't know what will happen next. So from there, we're going to go into terms to know, and we'll see what we can do. Some big terms to know. The first one is cost of attendance. You're like, what is that? Usually it's seen as COA. The cost of attendance can be those tuition and fees, which includes your room and board, books and supplies, transportation, personal miscellaneous expenses. It's basically the umbrella of everything that you might spend while participating in college. The second term that's very important is expected family contribution. On the FAFSA, it's deemed the EFC. The expected family contribution is your parent contribution towards your actual tuition and books and fees and all that fun stuff. And then your contribution as well. The monetary means you're able to actually contribute. Maybe like, how is this supposed to be calculated? It's actually calculated after you fill out the FAFSA during the whole process. The FAFSA is going to give you and spit out a number that says this is your expected family contribution and give you a need based upon that, or financial aid based upon that. The second one is financial need. The financial need is that first term, the COA, or the cost of attendance, which again is an umbrella amount of how much you're going to spend during college. And you're going to subtract your expected family contribution, or what you can actually give to the college based upon how much you make and all that fun stuff. So if you take those and subtract it, it's going to get your financial need. The third very important one is what it's actually named, the FAFSA. So the free application for federal student aid, a very nice long term, why we deem the acronym FAFSA. And again, the FAFSA opens October 1st. So again, it's only September. So it's going to open in about 2 weeks. You still have time to get everything ready if you want to make sure you do it right away. The FAFSA is used for more than just federal aid. So you might apply for it and they might spit out federal aid, but I'm going to talk about 3 specific avenues in which you can actually be awarded throughout the entire process. And then the FAFSA is going to determine your EFC, or the expected family contribution, which is extremely important because it deems what you're actually able to contribute to the college, and they kind of spit out a number of what they can actually give back to you with financial aid and scholarships and all that fun stuff to kind of mitigate the amount that you actually spent during your collegiate enterprise. From there, we're going to get some little helpful hints of FAFSA. So again, for the free application for federal student aid, the most helpful hint is, even though you're a senior this year and you complete it this year, you have to complete it every single year. So if you're a junior listening in, make sure you do it your senior year, make sure you do it your freshman of college, your sophomore college, junior college, senior college, even during grad school. Make sure you're filling out the FAFSA every single year. Your situation changes and it's very important to do so. Second, both student and parent need an FSA ID. You might be like, what is an FSA ID? For basic terms, FSA ID is more or less a signature online. So just make sure it says, hey, if my name's Ryan Noshi, it says the FSA ID, this specific thing, it says this is me, no one else can replicate it and make anything problematic with it. The third hint is priority filing deadline is December 15th. So if you do it past then, it's not a big deal. However, the most money, or your best chance of getting the most money, is if you actually give it in, or give the application and get it done by December 15th itself. And the most sticky situation, especially with the current times and situation in our world, is undocumented parents. A lot of times people think they cannot fill out the FAFSA if the parent is undocumented. However, we ask you just to put all zeros in place of your social security number. But as always, it is up to you as a family unit to make sure you know what is happening. From there, we're going to go into 3 types of aid, and then I'm going to jump off and give it back to Vanessa, and we'll go from there. So 3 types of aid basically falls under free money, earned money, and borrowed money. The first one to talk about is free money. Everybody loves that word. It's free. When we say it's free, you do not have to repay it. You don't have to give anything back. It is yours to use as you like within your college career. The first one is free is scholarships. So these are through colleges and universities. They're through outside organizations, which include civic organizations, churches, websites, etc. And again, they do not have to be repaid. The second thing that's going to, again, fall under the umbrella of free money, which you do not have to repay, are grants. So grants are based on need after filling out the FAFSA. Again, based on the expected family contribution, they spit out a number, and sometimes they're going to give you a grant based on what you actually need to attend college. Again, this does not have to be repaid. I'm going to continue saying that over and over again. The third one is federal grants, so a Pell grant or a Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant or an Oklahoma Tuition Aid Grant called the OTAG for Oklahoma State Grants. Anything that's labeled with a grant, more or less, you do not have to pay it back. It is free money just as well as scholarships. The final one is Oklahoma's Promise. Hopefully a lot of you are all seniors or juniors or individuals on this call. The Oklahoma's Promise is based on family income within the FAFSA. It pays the cost of tuition for 5 consecutive years in pursuit of a bachelor's degree. If you've enrolled in Oklahoma's Promise, there is a caveat annual income verification check. Every year, parent income cannot exceed $100,000. If it does, someone will contact you saying, hey, there's a flag, we need to figure this out, and then we'll go from there. And through Oklahoma's Promise, students may be eligible for partner scholarships. So make sure you're always looking in your email and other situations to see, hey, if there's another avenue, you can actually get more money based on things you've already applied to. So unfortunately, we're done with the free money. So again, scholarships are free money, grants are free money, Oklahoma's Promise can be free money. However, we're moving on to earned money. Earned money falls into 2 different categories. The first one is work-study student jobs. Work-study student jobs are need-based and determined by FAFSA. When you're actually going through the FAFSA, which could take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, there's actually going to be a checkbox. We have to check saying, hey, I'm very interested in getting a work-study student job, and that's through the university or college that you go to. And again, it's based upon the estimated family contribution or the need that actually is deemed worthy for you. The second one is a student job. It's not needs-based. That's if you determine to get a job as a waiter or you get a job at the library. These are jobs that you're actually going to pursue and then try to figure out how to utilize and pay for your college tuition. Sorry about that. The third one is the third one is borrowed money. My computer's a little slow, hang with me. The third one is borrowed money. Borrowed money falls into consideration of loans. What's a loan? Loan is an investment into your future, right? They're not bad things, they're not good things, they're just interest avenues to pay for your college once again. So loans, however, must be repaid with interest. Interest is a percentage of whatever you take out initially. You have to pay it every single month, depending upon the type of loan you take out. These loans can be based upon federal loans, private loans, and institutional loans, and they all have different repayment plans for your interest as you go. The federal loans tend to have lower fixed interest rates, flexible repayment options, and benefits you can find elsewhere. Loans can be broken up into 2 specific categories. The first one is direct subsidized loan. The direct subsidized loan is for undergraduates, and interest is paid by the U.S. Department of Education while the student is in school and during periods of deferment. What that means is while you're actually going to school, whether that be your undergraduate, your master's degree, your PhD degree, the Department of Education is actually going to pay that interest or that monthly allotment that you have to pay on top of the actual amount each and every month. However, the direct unsubsidized loan is for undergraduates and graduate students, and you or the borrower, whether that be your parent or someone else, is responsible for all interest immediately when you do it. So if you were to take out a $5,000 loan, you have to pay the interest every single month immediately after taking that loan out. And the third loan sequence is the Federal Direct Plus loan. This is an interesting one because it's for parents and or legal guardians of dependent undergraduates. So for myself, right, if I was to go to school, my freshman in college next year, I could ask my parents to say, hey, I'm unable to pay for this. Could you possibly take a loan out on my behalf? And this is determined by credit worthiness. So if they have good credit, they can get a Federal Direct Plus loan. However, they're going to be responsible for all of the interest. The caveat is the parents may borrow up to the full cost of education. So what that means is if your education costs $5,000 or $10,000 a year, they could take a lump sum of $40,000 right off the bat. However, if they take the $40,000 out, they have to pay interest on that every single month for the, whatever that may be, the 48 months that you're actually in college. So it adds up, so make sure you're reading the fine print before you take it out. So really, we have 6 steps of what to expect. So I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to hand it back because my computer does not like me. The first one is complete the FAFSA and sign with Fsa Id. Again, the Fsa Id is that electronic signature. Just fill out the FAFSA. It cannot hurt. The only thing that you might be confused about as you walk through and we can help you through is tax information and whatnot, which the next section is going to be about. And just make sure when you fill it out, list colleges. You don't have to know exactly what college you want to apply for right away. Just list the thing and you can change it as you go. The second step, the FAFSA is going to be processed. The third one, students can receive an email with the report or the SAR, and the colleges are actually going to receive information if listed on the FAFSA. So if you said you want to go to Langston University, they're going to get that information and then be able to give you a specific scholarship, grant, borrowed money that you need to go there. The fourth step is colleges are going to communicate with you if there are missing documents to submit. Say you forgot a tax form, and they're like, hey, we can't actually go forward with the FAFSA form. Please submit this, and we'll go forward from there. The fifth one, they're going to contact you, and you're actually going to say, oh, that's okay. I missed this document. I'm going to fill it out and then hand it back to the university. And then finally, the college is going to assemble the award package and send to admitted students. Again, these award packages can range from very little to a lot and depend upon each and every year. So it's very important you fill it out every single year. And although you might be like, hey, I didn't get what I thought I deserved or thought I needed, just bear with the system, fill out the scholarships, figure out how you can earn money throughout, and just enjoy your collegiate career. And hopefully the FAFSA helps you a little bit throughout. But if nothing else, fill it out, see what happens, and go from there. With that, I'm going to hand it back to Ms. Vanessa. I know that was quick and to the point, but that is the point. So those following along on all platforms, thank you so much for following along. And we're going to jump out into breakout rooms and hopefully answer more succinct questions. Thank you so much. And I hope you get something in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes.
Yes, thank you so much, Ryan. I kind of realized that I started recording late, but I will get most of that recording from prior sessions and make sure that gets to you just in case you missed anything. So at this time, I think Bailey is gonna break us out into some sessions. Again, feel free to ask questions as you go. And if the session ends early, feel free to come back into the main space and we can get you with a financial aid officer or to another session.
So we've shared in the chat what the 4 breakout groups are. The folks that are going to breakout group 2 for independent or dependent status, breakout room 3, which is FAFSA myths busted, or breakout room 4, any questions about additional documentation, verification process, or tax information, you are going to go actually into a breakout room. And those of you who are doing the Q&A session with John Tao from TCC are going to stay here in the main room for now. And that's going to be the session that is going to be aired on Facebook Live. So I'm opening the rooms for folks who are going to those other rooms. If you're wanting to do the Q&A session, we're going to stay live right here. And if you'd like to go to one of those other rooms, just let us know in the chat. And John, if you want to go ahead and get ready to go, we're about to hand things over to you as folks head out into those other rooms. All right, John, I think we're ready for you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. My name is John Tao, and I'm an academic counselor for the TRIO Educational Opportunity Center program at TCC. So the program that I work for, a little bit about it before we get started. It's a pre-college program to help individuals start their college or technical educational journeys. So I help out with individuals apply to any school they want to go to, helping out with financial aid, such as what we're doing today, provide scholarship opportunities, career assessments, and things like that. And the best part is all the services that we provide through our program is free. So that's just a little spiel about TRIO. And then I also have my sidekick here, Emily, who will be helping me monitor the chat box and also any questions that come about so I can address those as well. So without further ado, please feel free to ask your questions. You can either type it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask your question. And I will explain again that if you do have a personal or sensitive or a particular question that's really pertaining to your background, I would suggest flagging one of the monitors, the hosts, to have you set up with a one-on-one session with a financial aid officer or counselor so that your question could be addressed. And if you don't have that available for you, you can always schedule an appointment with me outside of this session later on, and we can address any questions you may have. But that we'll get started. So I'm seeing some questions that come up. All right, so this question is, how do you add another school to your FAFSA when you already submitted? Okay, so to answer that, you can actually log back into your FAFSA and go to the section that says school selection, and you can add or remove any school from there. So you'll just log back into your FAFSA, and there should be a link in the middle of the page that says update or make corrections to your FAFSA, and you'll be able to do that. And you'll be able to pick and choose or add and delete schools from your FAFSA. Next question is, do I have to take the SAT test before applying for FAFSA? No. And you'll be able to pick and choose or add and delete schools from your FAFSA. Next question is, do I have to take the SAT test before applying for FAFSA? Another question is, if you family are on disability, what do you do for tax part? It really depends. So if you did file your taxes, you will use the taxes that you all filed. If you were not required to file taxes, then you will use any source of income that you all may have received throughout that year to be applied on your FAFSA. And whenever you go through your FAFSA, there'll be a variety of questions pertaining about your tax information. And there is a question about disability, source of disability income. And so just read and make sure that question pertains to you, and you can put the amount there. But for the most part, it really depends if you did file or not. And then you'll just use your disability income statements if you did not file. Okay, another one. When can the class of 2021 apply for FAFSA? So anyone who is going to graduate next year, so seniors graduating next year in 2021, the FAFSA will open up on October 1st of this year. So in a couple weeks, that's when you will be able to apply for FAFSA. For seniors or anyone who has already graduated or just recently graduated this year in 2020, you can already apply for FAFSA. And you will be applying for the 2021 FAFSA application. Good questions, keep them coming.
Right, John, we have another question about if a child is adopted, do they use their parents' income on their FAFSA? And maybe on a similar note, how that might look different if someone were in guardianship but not officially adopted.
So for those individuals, a student who's been adopted, you will use your adopted parents' tax information if they file. Now, if the student was or in legal guardianship, that will actually make them an independent, so they will not use parental tax information on their FAFSA.
Good deal. We have another question, John, about the role of enlisting in selective service or enrolling in selective service that plays into the FAFSA. Can you file the FAFSA without enrolling in selective service? And if so, what might that mean down the road for you?
Good question. So For males, once they turn 18, it is required by federal law to register as for the selective service. So on the FAFSA itself, it will actually ask those male individuals that question if you registered or not. If you have not, I would suggest you go ahead and register through FAFSA. That will give you that option on the application. So just go ahead and do that. If not, you won't be able to receive any federal aid money. So you can register yourself, or you can actually register through FAFSA itself. So, seeing a lot of questions popping up. Okay.
Yeah, one back to John to the adoption question. If the child was in foster care prior to legal adoption, does that change the answer?
Yes, it does. So there will be a set of questions to determine if the student is dependent or independent. And one of the questions, I don't know the foster care situation that the student is in, but just read that question. It does ask if the individual was or currently in the foster care system. So just be sure to read that question and determine if the student is a foster youth or in the foster care anytime.
I'll go ahead and post a link to the dependency independent questions. So if you want to take a look at that, that might help clear it up a little bit as well.
Yes.
So can FAFSA pay for dual credit courses is a question we just got.
Ooh, that is a good question. From my understanding, you can, maybe Emily could be able to answer this,
Yeah.
but my understanding is that FAFSA will cover anyone who has graduated from high school or have gotten their high school equivalency. So if you're still in high school, you should be able to get I would suggest is to contact your high school counselor, because they'll be able to help you get those classes paid for, because you'll be considered doing concurrent enrollment.
Right. Yeah, you're only eligible for federal funding from the FAFSA when you've graduated from high school or have your GED. Let's see. Good questions, everybody. Keep them coming.
And just a reminder, if you have questions, you can go ahead for Emily and John. You can either unmute yourself and ask the question verbally, especially for those of you who are tuning in on the phone, or you can leave a comment in the chat box on Zoom or a comment on the Facebook live feed, and we will ask it for you.
See another question. How does parental income affect approval for FAFSA? It is one of the biggest factors in regards to determining how much you can get in financial aid through FAFSA. So it really depends. So if your parents earn quite a big chunk of income throughout the year, you may be limited or only get so much through FAFSA. But for the most part, I know any individual who applies for FAFSA will get some type of student loan amount. But now with regards of Pell grant, which is the free money to help pay for school that Ryan mentioned, that will also be determined by how much your parents' income and also your income if you worked. So, and you'll be able to figure out if you are actually eligible for any type of federal aid money after you submit your FAFSA. So at the end of your FAFSA, it gives you a confirmation page, and that confirmation page actually gives you an estimated amount of the 3 types of federal aid money you can get. So if you don't see Pell Grant on your confirmation page, that means you weren't eligible due to the income source, how much your parents made, and also how much you made. And if more likely, a lot of people will be able to see some type of federal student loan amount in their confirmation page.
So John, the next question is one that we get very, very frequently in what we do. So can you talk about how to handle it if parents are divorced? Who do we use on the FAFSA? How does custody play a role in whose tax information is included, et cetera?
So for students who have divorced parents, it is based through FAFSA regulation, depending on which parent provides the most financial support. So whoever provides the most financial support is who the student will use on their FAFSA. Regardless of custody and so forth, but most of the time it'll be whichever parent the student stays with the most and also provides the most financial support.
I'm reading the next question. It's a long one, so making sure I have it. Older children who no longer live in the home. Okay. So the question is about, the question we get to on the application where it's asking about how many people live in the home. So for the student, it's the student, parents, and then they always ask that, like, is there anybody else in the home that relies on the parents for income? So this individual said, we have 2 older children who no longer live in the home. And I answered that there are 3 people in our home and the other 2 do not rely on our income. The application gave me an error saying that the number relying on our income was wrong. Since I had started the application too early. Okay, so she's gonna have to redo it for the 2021-22 application when it opens in a couple of weeks. But she's wondering about that, who to count in that question about other people who are household members.
Right. So one is individuals who help support financially. So that if you have grandparents or nieces and nephews that you help support, more than half of your support in regards to financial support. And you can still count children who are off to college because you're still providing some, if you're still providing some financial assistance, you can still count those children as well. So, but who you wouldn't count is if you have children who are married, if you have a child who's already have children and supporting their own on their own and things like that. Those are individuals you don't necessarily have to count in regards of how many people are in the household.
I know some common questions that I hear are maybe not questions, but just assumptions. Should students apply to FAFSA even if they think their parents make too much? And another question, how soon should students apply? Does it matter, which part of their senior year that they are finishing their FAFSA application?
Yes, so I always tell every individual, always apply for FAFSA because it doesn't hurt to apply for it, and it doesn't obligate you to attend any of the schools that you list on your FAFSA. It's a free application, and at the end, your confirmation page will show you an estimated amount, so it would actually help you figure how much exactly the federal government can help assist you in you pursuing your education, your higher education specifically. So even if you think that your parents make where that you will not be eligible, most likely, I'm 100% sure that you will get some type of federal student loan money that you can borrow, but Pell Grant is where it will be if you're depending on how much your parents make. So, and then you can also be eligible for work study where you can work on campus part-time, and that's also through FAFSA, and also how much your expected family contribution is as well. So, it doesn't hurt. It's free, and I always do it for myself too, just to see. And then I always tell people, you know, if you definitely want to not pay out of pocket as much as you can, doesn't hurt to apply for it. And then the second part that you said, Vanessa, was
How soon should they apply?
how soon? Okay. I joke and tell everyone that you should be in front of your computer the day before October 1st at 11:59 before the day before. And once it hits midnight, October 1st, go ahead and apply. The reason why I said that is because the sooner that you can apply for FAFSA, here in the state of Oklahoma, you can also be eligible for OTAG, which is the Oklahoma Tuition Aid Grant. And that's an additional $1,000, depending on your eligibility, that you can get from the state of Oklahoma to help you pay for school that you don't have to pay back. So that's another $1,000 free for your education. And that is based on a first come, first serve, and based on need. So based on need first, and then first come, first serve, depending. So what the first come, first serve mean is when you first submitted your FAFSA application, and if you did ever have to make updates or corrections on your FAFSA later on, OTAG does not worry about that. It only worries and taking consideration of the first submission date that you did your first FAFSA application. But sooner the better. You can always you'll get more information from schools as well. And you'll be able to determine how much financial aid package award money you'll be able to get to help determine which school you want to attend.
John, as we're waiting for another question to come in, I'll just add to on the question of, if I don't think I'm going to qualify for any grants, why should I do the FAFSA? And I think one other important reminder is that if your family's financial situation changes due to like an illness in the family or a death in the family or something like that, if the college has your FAFSA on file, that's going to make your appeal process easier. So, you know, obviously we never want those things to happen, but having it in just in case something does change the financial situation is important, because then you might be able to appeal and get some aid from that college. So even if you don't qualify right now, it might help down the road if, you know, God forbid something happens.
Yes, and I also like to add to that too, especially during this year for individuals, if your parents had lost a significant any source of income throughout this year, specifically through the pandemic, you can actually go to the financial aid office to have them help you adjust your FAFSA to see if you can get additional money to help you pay for school. So there's a process that you can do that to help you, especially if like there's a significant increase of income now that, you know, someone's been laid off or unemployed or something has happened, or death in the family and things like that. Another question is, do you have to designate schools you're applying to on your FAFSA? Yes, you do. You can actually, you have to list at least one school, but you can actually list up to 10 different schools to receive your FAFSA information to help them figure out what kind of financial aid package they can award you. And you can always go back and change and add and remove schools.
We've got a question about unemployment income and if that's included on the FAFSA as well.
Unemployment income. I'm trying to remember if one of the specific questions had asked that. I believe there is a question, but I forget which one.
Well, and I believe, and I could be wrong, you're definitely more of the expert here. unemployment is reported on a 1040, is that correct? In the adjusted gross income, or is it not?
Yes, it depends. So, but
That's
giving the situation, if it was just a recent unemployment, I would just suggest having those unemployment statements handy and set up an appointment with the school's financial aid counselor so they can help adjust those amounts on the student's FAFSA.
So somebody else asked about how do I apply for the Pell Grant? If you go to the website, or does it become available once you apply for the FAFSA? So maybe talk about what happens after you submit the FAFSA.
So FAFSA will help determine if you can get Pell Grant, any federal student loans, and work study. And you would have to do that through the online application. And then once you submit it, then the schools that you list will get your FAFSA information, and then they will further process your financial aid package. The school will then reach out to the student to see if they need any additional documentation. And for the most part, that process is called verification. That means to verify some of the information on their FAFSA application. So it could be like if the parents was married, they may need a marriage license, or if they need information about tax information, they may need a copy of your 1040 or a tax return transcript from the IRS. So it just really depends. Now, in order to obtain the money will be sent to the school, and the school will be dispersing it to your student account. And then any money that's left over, depending on how you set it up, either direct deposit, or you can get a check from the school, where you can get a refund if you don't utilize all your financial aid money. And another question is OTAG only if you are going to a college in Oklahoma? OTAG is for Oklahoma residents. So preferably, yes, it is for any individual attending an Oklahoma school.
I also got a question privately about disability income or Social Security.
Okay. So that will be, there is a question on the FAFSA that asks about that. So just whenever you fill it out, if, because it could be tricky, because if you did file taxes and what I suggest is if you did file taxes, try to link your tax information to the student's FAFSA. And if there is any discretion or any change of amounts, that's where you would have to set up an appointment with the school's financial aid counselor to make any adjustment, such as if someone has been laid off or unemployed and things like that. But if you did not file taxes, then it would have you manually input all the information in and all the amounts in the FAFSA application. And there'll be specific questions that ask about unemployment, disability, and Social Security. So just thoroughly read through the questions and make sure you answer them correctly and then put the correct amounts.
Emily or John or anybody else, excuse me, who is a financial aid officer or high school counselor working with FAFSA, if you guys have any recommendations on like situations where students are hung up on certain parts of FAFSA, if you want to share that, that would be great.
Yes, I have tons, but where do I begin? So first thing is always try to see if you can link up the tax information because that will help tremendously in regards of the school processing your financial aid package. If you aren't able to transfer the tax information to the FAFSA, there will be additional documents or documentation that the school will need. And so it may take a bit more time for students to obtain those documents. And specifically, the tax information is where I find a lot of individuals being frustrated about or spend a given good amount of time trying to obtain those documentation, because you would have to order one if you aren't able to get one online. If you can get one online, then you can automatically print those out. But if you aren't able to obtain those online, it will take about 7 to 10 days from the IRS to mail you that information. And also, if all else fail and you're stuck, guess what? You can always call me.
That's what I do every time I get stuck with a student. I just call John.
OTAG is not a separate application. It's actually this state of Oklahoma, the Department of Education in the state of Oklahoma will get that information automatically through FAFSA from the Department of Ed. So there's no separate application. The application is your FAFSA. And one way to figure out if you get OTAG is the school that the student decided to attend to. Their financial aid office will let the student know if they're eligible for OTAG.
So somebody asked if a student and parent can set up their FSA ID before, and absolutely, that's the best way to do it. You can set up your FSA ID today, and that way your accounts are ready to go when you get to October 1st and try to fill out the actual application. So to do that, I'll put it in the chat, but just go to fsaid.ed.gov to create your FSA ID.
Yes, and that's another thing to go back to what Vanessa had asked or mentioned about some of the frustrations or some of the issues and challenges that are brought to me, and what I see all the time is people forgetting their username and password. Please write those down somewhere that you will have on hand whenever you fill out your student's FAFSA application. Because I have spent most of my time not actually helping the individuals on the FAFSA, actually been helping them with resetting their FSA ID accounts. So trying to reset their password or try to retrieve their username or try to reset their phone number or email that's associated to the account. And so be sure to write that information down, and you only need to create it once, and you can only create it once because it's linked up to your social security number, so you cannot recreate it twice.
This is not like an Instagram account or an email account. If you forget the password, you create a new one, which is what we see students try to do all the time. You will have it forever, so make sure you keep it somewhere. So if a student is qualified for assistance from the Department of Rehabilitation Services, does that affect the FAFSA?
Not that I'm aware of. Not unless the Department of, not unless DRS has any particular qualifications or limitations about that. But from my understanding with FAFSA, it does not.
So I had I believe a parent ask me if the FSA ID is the same for all kids in the household. So parents, your ID will stay the same for all of your children. So if you've done the FAFSA in the past for another student and you've got another senior this year, you'll use the same username and password, but every one of your children will have their own account. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, if you have 8 kids, you would use yours 8 times.
And then you'll be a pro at FAFSA and you can come do sessions with us.
That's right.
I come from a family of 7, and my dad forgets his username and password every single time. So their recommendation to write it down and keep it in a safe place is a great one.
Mhm.
If anybody else has like questions or comments to share, or if they've experienced anything that might be helpful to others, please feel free to share in the chat box or unmute yourself and share out loud.
Yeah. Hey, John, I did get another question, and I think I'll generalize it and give a couple of examples. So if somebody had one filing status in 2019, and now that filing status has changed through divorce or death or whatever the case may be, how do we then use that information? If you were married filing joint in 2019, but you're no longer that, how does that work?
Yeah, so on the, I'm assuming this is the parent. So the student, whenever it asks that information on their FAFSA, because on their FAFSA, it'll ask, are your parents, what's the marital status of your parents currently as of today? So that's where you'll indicate if you're separated, divorced, widowed, and then you would actually have to manually input tax information from then on. So it just really depends. Yeah. Sometimes you would have to manually input it, or sometimes you may be able to link the tax information. But let me give an example too. So if you're, for right now, you're using 2018 tax information, and if the parents were married during that time in 18, and as of today, they're separated or divorced, then you will go based off on the parent who is providing, who the student is living with the most and provides the most financial support. And you would have to go back in the 2018 tax information, and you would have to separate each amount that the FAFSA was asking from the 2018 taxes, even though that you filed married jointly. So you would have to go back and say, if you're the mom, you have to determine, okay, how much did you earn that year? And then take away that from the adjusted gross income. Yeah, you have to split it to make it where it's based on the current parents' tax, current parents' income information. That gets tricky, and that's where I would say set an appointment up with me, and I can help you determine that.
So, John, can you talk a little bit about, it can get confusing when we say the parent has to have an FSA ID and a student has to have an FSA ID. So the question in the chat is, does the child not have to complete an application if the parents complete one? That's all.
Okay, whenever you fill out the application, it is for the individual who is wanting financial aid. So whenever you log into FAFSA, whoever logs in that is whose FAFSA application you will be submitting. So that would mean the student, whoever the student is wanting financial aid, will need to log in. And they have to log in with their own FSA ID, their own username and password. And given this situation, the student is still considered dependent. So the parent, one of the parents, have to have an FSA ID so they can try to link up their tax information to the student's FAFSA and also electronically sign it at the end of the student's FAFSA. So the student has to log in with their FSA ID, and then where the parent's FSA ID comes into play is trying to link up the tax information and also electronically sign it at the end, if that makes sense. So student always has to sign in first. And then in the application itself, the parent will try to link up the tax information using their own FSA ID. And then at the end of the student's FAFSA application, they will use that to electronically sign. So if the parent logged in and filled out the application, you are now doing your own FAFSA application, meaning that you're wanting to go back to school, mom or dad.
Could you guys give some context to how FAFSA will be used once students are in college?
Yeah, so in their college, you can also use FAFSA to apply for certain scholarships. So certain institutions may have internal scholarships, and depending on the eligibility criteria. So for example, within the TRIO program, if you are a part of TRIO, sometimes we may be using your FAFSA information to determine if you're considered low income. So for low income individuals, then they can apply for FAFSA application, apply for scholarship applications. And then FAFSA can also help see if you can get any other additional money through the institution as well. And I know many of the Native American, American Indian tribes use FAFSA to determine how much individuals will be awarded for their tribal members. Yeah, so TRIO is a federally funded grant program. So there's actually 8 different types of TRIO program. There's actually 2 TRIO programs here at TCC. And then certain institutions will also have other TRIO programs like OSU, NSU, OU will have other types of TRIO programs. So TRIO programs TRIO programs are geared to help individuals who are low income and first generation. First generation means that mom and dad has never gotten a 4-year degree, and help those individuals pursue and obtain their higher education.
So I've gotten, sorry, I'm trying to read through some other questions. So I've gotten several questions about, if I had a student from a couple of years ago, or if my older child went to college and we did the FAFSA ID, and now I have to do it again. Maybe I have 2 students going to college at the same time. Does the student have to have the FSA ID and then I still have to have mine? Is kind of the questions that I'm getting.
Yes, you all both. If you created one a couple years ago it will still be the same one. If you don't remember it, you have to reset it. And you can actually do that through online. So if you can't do it online, then you would have to actually call the Federal Student Aid ID office to help you reset it. And depending on how much you remember and still have access to, it could be a fairly quick process. But if you don't remember the email, don't remember the username, don't remember anything about your account, they're going to have you go through an identity verification process to make sure it is you and your account that's associated to you. So that may take a bit longer process, but yes, you will still use the same one from several years ago, and it doesn't change regardless if you went to school and then having gone to school and now wants to go back to school, you will still use the same Federal Student Aid ID.
You know, your child will have one, and then you'll still have to have one so that you can electronically sign it or you know, input your tax information.
Another question, is TRIO something we have to apply for, or is it also included in FAFSA? It is not through FAFSA, so if you're interested, I don't know if Vanessa will share, but I can share my contact information, and you can give me a call, set up an appointment. Right now, since given the pandemic, I'm doing a lot of Zoom call as appointments to help individuals with the pre-college process. And so that's what I highly suggest and recommend. And I'm gonna type in my contact information in the chat box so everyone can have it. Good question, thank you for asking that.
Yeah, it looks like we're wrapping up a lot of the questions. If any of you guys want that one-on-one support, please go ahead and message Bailey or I, and we can get you connected. Is there any other follow-up questions that you guys have to any of what we discussed? Okay, well, I want to thank you guys all so much for participating, and all the financial aid officers and high school counselors who have been involved and put this all together. We do have more upcoming events. If you found this helpful and you have other questions later on, feel free to go to FAFSA at impacttulsa.com or fafsatulsa.com and let us know if you have any questions. I'm going to put this form in here. It's a survey. Let us know how we did. We'll continue to have other events soon. Let me see if I have it on the next slide. Yep, and again, if you have any questions, let us know. We'll follow up with an email with all the links that we shared. I'll share the contact information as well. And if you want, you can leave your contact information with us and we can help connect you to a financial aid coordinator. But thank you for attending today's session. Please feel free to put your responses into our survey.